Good morning, and welcome to a very strange worship for Madison Chapel. I'm going to try this today. We'll see how it goes. Maybe we'll do something different next week. But in the wake of the restrictions that have been placed on us by the governor and by the mayor and by all the folks who are looking out for our public health, we're doing the best we can. I hope this greeting finds everyone well, safe, and being smart with what you're doing in response to the coronavirus. So, a modified service today. I'd like to read the lectionary passages for today and then have a brief thought on one of the passages as we go through the week. So if you would so indulge me, a reading from 1 Samuel chapter 16, verses 1 through 13. The Lord said to Samuel, "How long will you grieve over Saul? I have rejected him from being king over Israel. Fill your horn with oil and set out. I will send you to Jesse of the Bethlehemite, for I have provided for myself a king among his sons." Samuel said, "How can I go? If Saul hears of it, he will kill me." And the Lord said, "Take a heifer with you and say, I have come to sacrifice to the Lord. Invite Jesse to the sacrifice, and I will show you what you shall do. And you shall anoint for me the one whom I name to you." Samuel did what the Lord commanded and came to Bethlehem. The elders of the city came to meet him, trembling, and said, "Do you come peaceably?" He said, "Peaceably. I have come to sacrifice to the Lord. Sanctify yourselves and come with me to the sacrifice." And he sanctified Jesse and his sons and invited them to the sacrifice. When they came, he looked on Eliab and thought, "Surely the Lord's anointed is now before the Lord." But the Lord said to Samuel, "Do not look on his appearance or on the height of his stature, because I have rejected him. For the Lord does not see as mortals see. They look on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart." Then Jesse called Abinadab, and made him pass before Samuel. He said, "Neither has the Lord chosen this one." Then Jesse made Shammah pass by, and he said, "Neither has the Lord chosen this one." Jesse made 7 of his sons pass before Samuel, and Samuel said to Jesse, "The Lord has not chosen any of these." Samuel said to Jesse, "Are all your sons here?" And he said, "There remains yet the youngest, but he is keeping the sheep." And Samuel said to Jesse, "Send and bring him, for we will not sit down until he comes here." He sent and brought him in. Now he was ruddy and had beautiful eyes and was handsome. The Lord said, "Rise and anoint him, for this is the one." Then Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him in the presence of his brothers. And the Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon David from that day forward. Samuel then set out and went to Ramah. Our second reading comes from Ephesians chapter 5, verses 8 through 14. "For once you were in darkness, but now in the Lord you are light. Live as children of light. For the fruit of the light is found in all that is good and right and true. Try to find out what is pleasing to the Lord. Take no part in the unfruitful works of darkness, but instead expose them. For it is shameful even to mention what such people do secretly. But everything exposed by the light becomes visible. For everything that becomes visible is light. Therefore it says, 'Sleeper, awake. Rise from the dead, and Christ will shine on you.'" Our gospel reading this morning is quite lengthy. It comes from John chapter 9. As he walked along, he saw a man blind from birth. His disciples asked him, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" Jesus answered, "Neither this man nor his parents sinned, but was born blind so that God's works might be revealed in him. We must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. Night is coming when no one can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world." When he had said this, he spat on the ground and made mud with the saliva and spread the mud on the man's eyes, saying to him, "Go, wash in the pool of Siloam," which means sent. Then he went and washed and came back able to see. The neighbors and those who had seen him before as a beggar began to ask, "Is this not the man who used to sit and beg?" Some were saying, "It is he." Others were saying, "No, but it's somebody like him." He kept saying, "I am the man." But they kept asking him, "Then how were your eyes opened?" He answered, "The man called Jesus made mud, spread it on my eyes, and said to me, 'Go to Siloam and wash.' Then I went and washed and received my sight." They said to him, "Where is he?" And the man said, "I don't know." They brought to the Pharisees the man who had formerly been blind. Now it was the Sabbath day when Jesus made the mud and opened his eyes. Then the Pharisees also began to ask him how he had received his sight. He said to them, "He put mud on my eyes, then I washed, and now I see." Some of the Pharisees said, "This man is not from God, for he does not observe the Sabbath." But others said, "How can a man who is a sinner perform such signs?" Then they were divided. So they said again to the blind man, "What do you say about him?" "It was your eyes he opened," he said. "He is a prophet." The Jews did not believe that he had been blind and had received his sight until they called the parents of the man who had received his sight and asked them, "Is this your son who you say was born blind? How then does he now see?" His parents answered, "We know that this is our son and that he was born blind. But we do not know how it is now that he sees, nor do we know who opened his eyes. Ask him, he's of age. He can speak for himself." His parents said this because they were afraid of the Jews, for the Jews had already agreed that anyone who confessed Jesus to be the Messiah would be put out of the synagogue. Therefore his parents said, "He is of age. Ask him." So for the second time they called the man who had been blind, and they said to him, "Give glory to God. We know that this man is a sinner." He answered, "I don't know whether he is a sinner or not. One thing I do know, that though I was blind, now I see." They said to him, "What did he do to you? How did he open your eyes?" He answered them, "I have told you already, and you wouldn't listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you also want to become his disciples?" Then they reviled him, saying, "You are his disciple, but we are disciples of Moses. We know that God has spoken to Moses, but as for this man, we don't know where he comes from." The man answered, "Here is an astonishing thing. You do not know where he comes from, and yet he opened my eyes. We know that God does not listen to sinners, but he does listen to one who worships him and obeys his will. Never since the world began has it been heard that anyone opened the eyes of a person born blind. If this man were not from God, he could do nothing." They answered him, "You were born entirely in sins, and are you trying to teach us?" And they drove him out. Jesus heard that they had driven him out, and when he found him, he said, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" The man answered, "And who is he, sir? Tell me so that I can believe in him." Jesus said to him, "You have seen him, and the one speaking with you is he." He said, "Lord, I believe," and he worshipped him. Jesus said, "I came into this world for judgment, so that those who do not see may see, and those who do see may become blind." Some of the Pharisees near him heard this, and they said to him, "Surely we are not blind, are we?" Jesus said to them, "If you were blind, you would not have sin. But now that you say, 'We see,' your sin remains." This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. In the midst of the chaos and panic that the global coronavirus pandemic has brought to us, there's also been some biblical level disasters and worries and anxieties that have put a lot of our Christian brothers and sisters at a state of panic. You'll recall that in the midst of all this, we have political turmoil going on. We also have earthquakes. We might as well be reading out of one of the apocalyptic passages of the Gospels where we hear about wars and rumors of wars and earthquakes and floods and famines. Friends, I pray that the Spirit of God rests heavily upon you and that you know that all things work for good for those who believe in the Lord God. But what are we to do in the face of so much turmoil? This time in our lives is no different, really, than any other time in world history. Stuff happens and people have to respond to it. However, in our very advanced and scientifically minded lives, we know that it's smarter for us to self-quarantine, to stay away from other people, which for many of us is painful. I, for one, miss the heartbeat of my usual day where I'm surrounded by thousands of people having to make quick decisions and be able to answer questions on the fly of very important things for people's lives. Maybe you're feeling that sort of loneliness too, where your usual day of the fleeting interactions we have out in the marketplace or in society have left a big hole in your life. Maybe the lesson here is that we need to practice Sabbath. We need to practice a little solitude. That's what I've been trying to do, in as much as I can, with 2 little ones running around the house, bored to death. But what are we to do? Oh, we can read books and we can watch Netflix and we can call one another on the phone. But what can we do in the face of this epidemic? It seems at times that not only are we segregated and sequestered and quarantined physically, but eventually we become quarantined in our souls as well. Whatever your state today, however expansive or narrow your soul is, I think the lessons of the Scriptures that the lectionary has put out for us can be helpful. In John's Gospel, we read about this fascinating story of the man born blind. Now, there's a lot here, and there were a lot of verses that we read today. There's a lot of political background. The Pharisees and their rejection of Jesus and his miracles. The sociological issues of a man being born blind, well outside of our current medical understanding of blindness. Notice that at the very beginning, the question is, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he should be born blind? We today have a tendency to baptize all the events around us, whether they're human events or natural events, and ask, how is God punishing us? Or how is God blessing us? Be careful with that. Much like you've heard me talk about tornadoes and hurricanes and natural disasters. On the same street, when one family cries out a shout of thanksgiving that God spared their home, just down the street is a family that, by the same theological idea, asks why God destroyed their home. Or in this virus, why do some get sick and some not? Why do some suffer and some not? Be careful how much you ascribe to God's hand doling out punishment or blessings through the natural world. I'm not saying God does not work in such ways, but be careful how much moral and ethical value you assign to nature. But that's the background of the man being born blind. Who sinned, O Lord, this man or his parents, that he should be born blind? From then, we have this great story about this poor fellow who has had his life completely transformed. And he keeps getting dragged in front of the spiritual and religious and social authorities, demanding that he explain himself. And the beauty of it is, there's no explanation to be had. The man can see. It's not like he's faking it. And we have this long, drawn-out court proceeding. But the whole story is bracketed by two encounters with Jesus. The first one is when Jesus comes upon the man and heals him. And then at the end, Jesus reappears in the story and has this fascinating conversation with the man. In the midst of all that, there's uproar. There's social anxiety. The parents get dragged in and they're afraid. The Pharisees are split. There's probably some rough words spoken there. They don't know what's going on. They feel like the entire structure of their religion is being threatened. They think that society is being turned upside down. And here is this man with the undeniable truth on his face. He was blind, but now he can see. It's been on my heart this week that when Jesus heals this man, I don't think Jesus is picking a fight with the Pharisees or trying to upend society. He's not a revolutionary who's going to get an army behind him and challenge the Romans. He doesn't even charge into the middle of the Pharisees' chamber and start setting them straight. No, he operates on the outside, oftentimes in isolation. Oh yeah, there's crowds trying to press in on him. But in some of the most tender moments, we see Jesus operating solo. In his prayers, in his miracles. And here, Jesus doesn't wave his hands in a giant puddle of mud and cure all blindness. He cures one man. One man whose story becomes a poignant example of the power of God. He does one thing. He does one act that has a ripple effect throughout the whole town. That's important to me this week. As I sit and think, what am I going to do now? There's a chance that we can sit here and let the loneliness or the isolation or the fear and anxiety crush in on us. And we ask ourselves, what can I do? In Jesus' example here, he did one thing with one person. He reached out and changed one life. He didn't make a big show of it. He didn't march into the Senate chamber and demand change. No, he reached out and touched one person. Now, there was a lot of almost comical fallout from that. But by changing one life, Jesus not only gained a disciple, but was able to show the entire world what an encounter with God could be like. So this week, today, when I'm feeling hopeless and helpless in the face of what I'm hoping our temporary reality is, when I ask myself, what can I do? I can do one thing. I can reach out to one person. I can be the presence of Christ in one way. I can do one right thing. And if each of us can find just one right thing to do, one small act of God's grace shining in this world, even though we're quarantined and miles apart, even though we're sequestered, we will make such a constellation of little deeds that even in our quarantine we might light up this world. So my friends, I encourage you to find one thing to do. One act of hope. One act of kindness. One act that will break like a chisel through the quarantine. And much, I hope, like Jesus' act, by living like children of the light, we might change an entire community, even when we're in quarantine. Amen. I hope this time together has been good for you. It's a little strange for me to be talking into a camera. I miss being with you. I miss the life we have together and the way the Spirit works in our midst. As you have your lives together this week, may you find a way to shine your light into this strange new world we have. And may you find just one way that you can be a child of the light in the midst of what seems to be a crushing darkness. And now, may God bless you and keep you. May God cause His countenance to rise upon you. May God cause His face to shine upon you and give you peace. Amen.